Hey, what's up everyone? This is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome back to my ultimate guide to Logic Pro. Originally, I was going to move on to using the sends, buses, and routing for routing up time-based effects in the mixer in this video, but it dawned on me that I should probably show you how to use EQ and also how to use the compressor in Logic, because EQ and compression are really going to be your bread and butter for mixing, for fixing frequency imbalances, and controlling the dynamics of your recordings. So in this video, I'm going to give you a full tutorial of using the Channel EQ plugin. In the next video, I'll give you a tutorial on how to use the compressor plugin. And then in part 28, I'll move on to sends, buses, and aux tracks. Before we jump into the tutorial though, I want to quickly tell you about the sponsor of this video, Boombox. Do you want to take your music to the next level? Are you a musician looking for a collaborative platform to share your work and receive feedback from your peers or bandmates? Look no further than Boombox.io. Boombox allows musicians to upload their tracks and leave time-stamped feedback for each other. This makes it super easy to collaborate on music remotely from the comfort of your own home studio. Head over to Boombox.io and sign up today and get 10 gigabytes of free storage. Your music will thank you. Okay, so if you want to work along with me, I've included a free download of this demo project in the video description below. You'll recognize the song because it was a project I used in some of the earlier videos, but off screen I've re-recorded my lead vocals. I've also tracked some layer vocals for the chorus, and I've also played around with the arrangement a bit. So before we get started, let me just play the project as it is now.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn this ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day. Don't ever tell me why. Don't you ever tell me why. 'Cause I don't want to know. I carried your heart when you needed me. That's just how our love was meant to be. I keep on tearing through these tragedies. I took the brunt of your shame and all your misery.
Okay, so that's the song as is. You can see on the vocals there are no effects whatsoever. These are completely dry, although I did tune the vocals just so they're bearable to listen to off screen, but no other effects have been applied to them. Okay, so to load the channel EQ, you can do this in the mixer or you can do this in the inspector. As I demonstrated in the previous video, you can double click on the EQ display and this will automatically bring up a channel EQ. Or you can just click here in one of your blank audio effects inserts, go down to EQ, and you can add an instance of the channel EQ. Okay, so equalizers come in a lot of different shapes and forms, but the channel EQ is what's called a parametric equalizer, meaning that you can not only boost or cut the amplitude at certain frequency ranges, you can also move those center frequencies around, and you can also control the bandwidth of each of these bands. You can make it more wide or you can make it more narrow and maybe just hone in on a certain frequency. Now, if you want to sort of start from scratch with the channel EQ, you can reset the setting by going up to the preset menu in the upper left and selecting recall default, and it'll send you back to the default setting. You can also adjust things like the zoom over here. So if you want it smaller, you can make it 50%, 100%. I'm going to make this a little larger just for you guys so you can see what I'm doing here. I'll set it to 150%, and I've just got the vocals soloed. Now, the channel EQ will give you an analysis of what you're listening to. You just have to make sure you turn on the analyzer down here. So if you turn this on and play back the track, you'll actually see a frequency analysis of the track that you're playing.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day.
There's also a high quality button here. Essentially what this does is it turns on over sampling. So I typically will always use this in high quality mode unless for some reason I'm getting hangups in Logic where I'm getting errors because my processor can't keep up. But in that case, you most likely just need to go up to Logic Pro settings, go to audio, and then increase your buffer size to the maximum value. So anytime you're mixing and working with plugins, I recommend using the highest buffer size. Okay, so the channel EQ has 6 main bands. You have these middle bands here, and the main ones are actually the middle 4. These are what are called peaking filters. Essentially, these allow you to boost a band of frequencies or cut a band of frequencies. So all 4 of these are the same, and you can turn them on or off here, so you can bypass each of the bands if you're not using them. The next ones are the shelves. Shelving filters are a little bit different in that they boost or cut frequencies at a certain point and then continue to boost or cut that frequency. So these are really helpful if you're trying to sort of boost the top end air and clarity of a recording or reduce it. Maybe you have a microphone that's a little too bright. You could pull this down with a high shelf cut. Likewise, on the outer ends, you have your high pass and low pass filters. Now, the terminology with filters is a little weird, especially for beginners, but a filter like this one down here, what this does is it cuts the low frequencies down to basically infinity at some point, but it allows high frequencies to come through. So you would actually call this a high pass filter because pass means allow. So you're allowing high frequencies while cutting low frequencies. High pass filters are really, really common in mixing for getting rid of like guttural sounds and low sounds and vocals, getting rid of any low boomy frequencies and really any type of recording. Likewise, you have a low pass filter. Low pass filters allow low frequencies while cutting high frequencies. These are often used to filter out really high frequencies in guitar amp recordings. They're also used a lot as an effect by sweeping these around in electronic music to create filter sweeps. So there's 3 main types of filters or bands that we're dealing with here in the channel EQ. You have peaking filters in the middle, which I just refer to as bands. Some people prefer the term bell curve, shelving filters, and then high pass and low pass filters. You can also refer to the high and low pass filters as low cut filters and high cut filters. So let's recall the default setting real quick. Now, what I like to do with vocals is I like to cut the low end to get rid of any like guttural boominess that might be in the vocal. This can also compensate for maybe singing into a microphone a bit too close and getting a lot of that proximity effect by being really close to the mic. So what I'm going to do is turn on the high pass filter. And for each band, there are 3 parameters you can control down here. The top parameter is the frequency parameter. Now, this is going to be a little different for the low and high pass filters versus the peaking filters or shelving filters. With peaking filters and shelves, this is called the center frequency or sometimes just the filter frequency. Whereas with the high and low pass filters, this is called the cutoff frequency. It's where the frequency has already been cut by 3 decibels. You can see here that the frequency is not up here, it's down here for this filter. Now, the options for your filters are also going to be a little bit different. The middle one is called your roll-off slope. So if you pull this up, you'll get more attenuation, more cutting, more reduced volume per octave, so 48 dB of attenuation per octave. If you pull this down, you can get a more gentle filter, 6 dB per octave. So I'm going to go with something a bit stronger, a bit more steep roll-off slope. And then the option below it is the resonance. Essentially, this is like a feedback at the cutoff frequency. This can be used to compensate for the loss of volume here just before the cutoff frequency. And again, this can be used for other sort of modulation effects and things like that when creating filter sweeps in electronic music. You can also control these in the user interface. So for high and low pass filters, you can just drag left or right to control the cutoff frequency, and dragging up and down will control the resonance. However, the slope has to be adjusted manually from down here. So for vocals, typically I like to cut frequencies lower than like 60 to 100 hertz, depending on the singer. For female vocalists, you can typically cut a little higher, closer to 100 hertz. With male vocalists, you may want to go a bit lower. So let's try that out and let's see if we can get rid of some of the guttural tones.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Now that you're sober, don't.
On the B of sober, you could hear there was a little pop in the signal before I used the EQ, before I used the filter.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over.
And let's actually look at the analysis. I'll just bypass that band.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over.
You can see all that low frequency buildup in the bottom there. It's almost imperceptible, but I like to do this with pretty much all of my vocal recordings. Typically, I like to cut the bass in most instruments that are not bass instruments or are not contributing to the low end of the song. It just sort of cleans up the muddiness in the bottom end and makes some room for the bass guitar down there. Now with vocals, I also like to boost the frequencies just before the cutoff to give the voice some more body and some more depth to it. So you can use one of your peaking filters or bands here. I don't do this too much. I'm not really boosting this a lot, but I'll boost it a bit. And then for your bands, you can control the center frequency down here. It's your first control. The second control is how much boost or cut you're applying. And then the bottom one is your bandwidth, or Q, as it's often called. You can also control the peaking and shelving bands from within the user interface. Up and down controls the gain, left and right controls the center frequency, and to control the Q, you hold Option and Command at the same time, and you can drag up and down to make more narrow bandwidths or more wide bandwidths. So you don't want to do everything like wideband like this because it's going to affect too many frequencies. So I'm going to narrow this up a bit and just play with the bottom frequencies.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day.
Now, if there's an area of the mid-range in your voice that you want to cut, you can also try doing that with another one of these bands.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship.
Sometimes this range between like 200 and 800 hertz is often cut in some vocal recordings. It just helps to clean up the mid-range of the voice. But you probably don't want to be cutting frequencies between 1K and 5K, because this is really where the diction of your words come through. This is where a lot of the clarity of the voice comes through. So typically what I'll do, anytime I'm boosting or cutting, I will grab a band and I'll really boost it or I'll really cut it and I'll sweep it around and listen for like a sweet spot that works. And then I'll pull it down or pull it back, because you don't want this, you don't want these bands cranked like this. It's going to really destroy the tone of the recording. You just want to apply a little bit, like probably no more than 5 dB of boost or attenuation in most situations.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day. Don't ever tell me why. Don't you ever tell me why. 'Cause I don't want to know.
And you may also apply multiple boosts to multiple ranges. I found that the 1K range is kind of bringing out the mid-range clarity in my voice, and the 4K boost is bringing out the mid-high clarity in my voice. Again, both of these boosts are helping with the diction or clarity of my words. Now, I do want to mention something here because I know someone will comment on it if I don't. Generally speaking, you want to check all of your EQ changes in the mix. Like, you don't want to keep the vocals soloed for too long, because something that might sound good soloed may not always sound great in the mix. So typically I'd be checking this vocal in the mix multiple times as I EQ it by just pressing S to toggle the track solo. I'm keeping this soloed for now just so you can more easily hear the changes the EQ is making. Now, lastly, what I like to do with vocals is I like to boost the top end. This helps bring out the sibilance. This helps bring out the air in the vocals, the sort of upper end clarity. Now, the microphone I used for this recording is already a very bright microphone, so I may not need to add too much here, at least for this specific microphone. But especially if you're using a dynamic mic, you're going to end up boosting the top end quite a bit. So I'm just going to sort of flatten this curve a bit here and maybe just apply a little bit of like a sibilance boost to the top end.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day.
Now, before we go A being the before and after, what I want to do is actually reduce the overall gain, because by boosting most of these bands, I'm inherently going to be increasing the volume of the track. So it's always important to try to gain match your input and output of your plugins. So I'm actually going to use this sort of global gain control here to pull down the gain a bit to compensate for the volume. It's not entirely important to be 100% volume matched, but it's just a good idea to not boost on every single plugin, because then by the end of the signal chain, you'll end up with a signal that's clipping. So I'll generally compensate for gain boosts in most of my plugins.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn the ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day. Don't ever tell me why. Don't you ever tell me why. 'Cause I don't want to know. I carried your heart when you needed me. That's just how our love was meant to be. I keep on tearing through these tragedies. I took the brunt of your shame and all your misery. I gave you everything and you left me in the cold.
Yeah, so now the vocals have kind of a vibe to them. The words are coming out more clearly. The voice has a bit more body to it. Now, we do need to add compression to the vocals at some point here to control some of the dynamics, especially some of the peaks here in the chorus. We need to sort of round out those dynamics, but at least the vocals have a good start with a decent frequency balance. Now, in the chorus, I've added these left and right layered vocals. They're essentially just singing in unison with the lead vocal. And what I'll typically do for layered vocals is I'll copy over the lead vocal setting by holding Option and dragging over the plugin. And then I'll use that lead EQ setting as a starting point for the backing vocals, but I'll typically filter out more of the bottom end. I'll reduce the high end boosts. You may even consider bringing in the high cut or the low pass a bit, just to get rid of some of the air in the backing vocals. Because often what can happen is the consonants in the backing vocals can sound almost like a slight delay effect if they're not perfectly in alignment.
I carried your heart when you needed me. That's just how our love was meant to be. I keep on tearing through these tragedies. I took the brunt of your shame and all your misery.
Now, another instrument that I know needs some help is the acoustic guitar. Most acoustic guitar recordings will sound really boxy if you don't EQ them properly or compensate for the microphone that you're using. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the channel EQ here on my first acoustic guitar track. Actually, not a bad recording. I'm going to go ahead and cut some of the low end a bit. And I'm actually going to boost the low end a touch. And let's try boosting the upper mid frequencies here a bit and see if I can bring out some of the percussiveness in the strumming. You know, I think I'm just going to use the shelf instead. And for the shelves, the bottom control, which is the bandwidth on the peaking filters, functions like a slope for the shelf. So let's make this more of like a gentle slope. Something I do pretty often with acoustic guitars, I'll cut the mid lows a bit to kind of get rid of some of the boxiness. Yeah, it's crazy how much of a difference just a few slight EQ adjustments can make. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that over to the other guitar. Let's listen to both, and I'll go ahead and just repan these left and right.
Don't turn this ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day. Don't ever tell me why. Don't you ever tell me why. 'Cause I don't want.
Now, bass is one of the instruments where I'm not going to be cutting the low end because it needs to be down there. I want the low end fundamental down there. But in some bass recordings, you may find yourself boosting the mids and mid highs a bit to bring out some of the natural percussiveness and the transients in the bass line, especially if it's picked bass.
Why? 'Cause I don't want to know.
Rhythm guitar is really subjective and it's very genre dependent. So for just some simple crunch rhythms like this, I'm just going to try to thicken the bottom and mid-range a bit, and I'm also going to filter the low end and the top end. So here I'm just kind of thickening the guitar a bit. So let me go ahead and just copy that over to the other guitar track. Let's go ahead and pull that down and repan it. Let's listen to those together and then I'll listen to them in the mix. And one little trick you can do with guitar parts like this that are doubled, you can try emphasizing a different frequency for your mid-range boost, maybe a little higher or lower, just to give the left and right channels a bit of variation. The filters I'm applying here are not necessary in this context, but I'll often add filters like this just to make sure I'm not getting any like raspy top end or any boomy low end.
It's over. Don't
If you're using Drummer or Drum Kit Designer, you're probably going to want to split your drum kit in multi-output mode. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to just select the right side of the instrument insert here, and you can change this from stereo to multi-output. Now, what you can do here is at the bottom, you'll see this plus button. If you click this 4 times, this is going to create 4 auxiliary channels for the drum kit. So the first channel is going to be like the cymbals. The second channel will be the kick drum. The third channel will be the snare drum, then the toms, and then finally any hi-hat or percussion. So any shakers or tambourines will be in that channel as well. If you click plus again, you'll see the next one's just an empty auxiliary track. So we don't need that, so I'll go ahead and just delete that. Now, when you separate the channels, it's going to leave all of the stock plugins that were on the drum kit. So I'm actually going to remove all of these since this first channel is just the cymbals now. And let's just kind of maybe brighten up those cymbal crashes a bit. Maybe give him a little more body too. Most of these drum kits are like pre-EQ'd, so you don't have to do a whole lot to them. I am going to boost the mid-highs on the kick drum just to give it some more punch.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that turn this ship around.
Now, obviously, that's too much, but let's pull that back a bit.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn this ship around and tell me that.
For snare, you may opt to bring up the top end a bit, just to bring out the top end sort of shimmer in some of these ghost notes and things like that. If you're EQing a real snare drum, I usually boost the bottom end as well, the bottom mid-range, to give the snare some body. But I don't know in this context, because it's a sampled kit, if we actually need to do that.
Tell me why, 'cause I don't want to know. I carried your heart when you needed me. That's just how our love was meant to be. I keep on tearing through these tragedies. I took the brunt of your shame and all your misery.
And you can see as you add more and more effects, the level of your stereo output will creep higher and higher, because as you add more effects and more gain boosts in these effects, you're increasing the overall level of the mix. So I'm constantly finding myself pulling down the level of all of the tracks. Off screen, I moved all of the channel EQs down to the same insert slot so that I can bypass them all at the same time. So let's check this out, and I'll bypass and activate the EQ a few times so you can hear the cumulative effect of all of these EQ plugins in my mix.
Now that you're sober, don't tell me that it's over. Don't turn this ship around and tell me that you can't give one more day. Don't ever tell me why. Don't you ever tell me why. 'Cause I don't want to know. I carried your heart when you needed me. That's just how our love was meant to be. I keep on tearing through these tragedies. I took the brunt of your shame and all your misery.
So yeah, everything is got a bit more life to it. Everything sort of pops out in the mix a bit better with just a few basic EQ adjustments. One little thing I want to leave you with, though, is I don't want you to think that my methods for EQing are necessarily the best way. EQ is a very subjective thing, and changing and shaping the tone of instruments in a mix is highly genre dependent, and it's dependent on your own personal taste. So I don't want you to think that this is the gospel of EQing techniques. Use your ear and dial things in a way that works for you and that you think sounds best. And if you're worried that it doesn't sound great, get another pair of ears on it. Let someone else listen to it and get a second opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching.